Vav Sif Chaf Beis. I will just mention one word about Sif Chaf Aleph, and that is that we were talking about a single Pesach that has a post in the middle, whether it's considered to be one doorway or whether it's considered to be two doorways. So one thing which the Mechaber does not say, but it would seem to me misvara that this would be pashut, is that if there are two mashkaifs, there's two lintels, so then clearly it's two doorways. In other words, the entire suffix is only talking about a case where you have a single mashkaif, you have a single lintel going from post to post with another post in the middle. So that's where this suffix applies, whether that's considered one doorway or two doorways. But when you have two separate lintels on either side of the middle post, so then there's much more of a tzad, it would seem to me, to say that that would be considered two doorways. That's just misvara. Okay. Sif Chav Beis. Hasoicher bayis b'chutz la'aretz v'hadar b'pundik b'eretz Yisrael pater mi-mezuzah. This is a halacha that's extraordinarily negea this time of year in Eretz Yisrael, and that states as follows. Somebody who rents a home in chutz la'aretz, or one who lives in a pundik in Eretz Yisrael, is pater mi-mezuzah shloshim yom. He's pater from mezuzah shloshim yom. We'll come back to that in a second. V'haseicher bayis b'Eretz Yisrael. But someone who rents a home in Eretz Yisrael or an apartment in Eretz Yisrael, chayev b'mezuzah miyad mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael. He's chayev immediately mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Now, a lot of these words are very debatable in what the precise meaning is. But let's see the Gra. The Gra in Sifkat and Aleph says, I'm sorry, I apologize, not the Gra, rather the Gillian Marsha. The Gillian Marsha, over here in this print, the siman is very similar. The Gillian Marsha says, Hasoicher bayis. The Gillian Marsha, as we mentioned once, is not the Marsha, it's Reb Shlomo Eger, who's also the Marsha. Hasoicher bayis. Mashma dim habayis shaloi chayev miyad. In other words, the fact that the Mechaber discusses a tenant who's renting a home indicates that if somebody owns the home, so then there's no question that he's chayev immediately. And that's whether you're in Chutz La'aretz or whether you're in Eretz Yisrael. Now, this is a very, very common misconception. People buy a home in Chutz La'aretz and they move in, and there's no mezuzah, and you say, where's your mezuzah? And they say, oh, well, I have 30 days. You don't have 30 days. If you're the homeowner, says Reb Shlomo Eger, chayev miyad. Okay? Now, another very important Reb Shlomo Eger, he continues, v'chein hasoicher einay chayev gam la'achar shloshim yom ki midrabanan. If you are a tenant renting an apartment or a home, so we say that after 30 days in Chutz La'aretz, you're chayev. In other words, again, an owner in Chutz La'aretz is chayev immediately. A tenant in Chutz La'aretz is only chayev after 30 days. Now, when an owner is chayev immediately, that's a chayev d'oraisa. When a tenant is chayev after 30 days, is that a d'oraisa or a d'rabanan? That's only a d'rabanan. It's not a d'oraisa. It's not l'kulei alma. No, it's not at all l'kulei alma. It's a big machlokes, but that's the hachra. It's generally accepted opinion amongst the achreinim is that the chiyuv of a tenant is only a chiyuv d'rabanan, and that's whether the tenant is in Chutz La'aretz or in Eretz Yisrael. Either way, the chiyuv of a tenant is d'rabanan. So what's the nafkamina? If it's d'rabanan or d'oraisa, there's a lot of nafkaminas. But one of the most common nafkaminas is that a tenant often moves into an apartment and there are already mezuzahs there. And sometimes those mezuzahs are not according to his minig. So Reb Elyashiv was of the opinion that, okay, since it's only a chiyuv d'rabanan, one could be mekel, and you don't have to replace the mezuzahs, that they be in accordance with your minig, whether it's Beis Yosef to Arizal or Arizal to Beis Yosef, or even Sfardi mezuzahs for an Ashkenazi. Reb Elyashiv held that one can use a mezuzah not kefi min haggai because the chiyuv is only d'rabanan. Now, let's just see over here, and I don't know if you have it, every Shulchan Aruch has a different print, but in the Nachlas Tzvi, he says, Mashma da'af im socher habayis al shana tmima eina keveya hamezuzah ad la'acha shleishim. Just wanted to see those first few words. So this is also a tremendous machlokes achreinim. In other words, we say that a tenant is pater for 30 days, right? Again, if you own a home, you're chayev immediately. If you're a tenant, you're only chayev after 30 days. There are many achreinim that say The Nesivos holds this way. Rav Shach, interestingly, has a piece in Avi Ezri where he says this way, and there are a number of other Acharonim that say this as well, that if somebody rents an apartment and you sign a contract for a year, let's say, I think that's the most standard contract, is a year contract, so then they hold you chayiv immediately. In other words, because the reason why we say that a tenant is not chayiv for 30 days is because there's a lack of kviyas. Now, when you own the home, so you're kavua right away. The minute you move in, it's your home. You just spent $1 million on this house, you're moving in, you're kavua immediately. But if you're a tenant and you have a landlord, so there's a lack of permanence in your residency in this abode. And therefore, for 30 days, we're not mechayev you. So there are those that say, yeah, okay, but if you sign a contract for a year, so then there's no lack of permanence. It's permanent immediately. And therefore, they hold that this kula does not apply to such an individual, whereas many other Acharonim disagree. And they say that Chazal do not differentiate between someone who signs a contract and someone who does not sign a contract. And therefore, if someone's in this situation, they should ask the local Orthodox rabbi, because it is a very big machlokes. Now, we did discuss a pundik. So what is a pundik? So there are a number of different definitions of a pundik, but in common parlance, we would refer to a pundik as a tzimmer or a hotel room. In other words, if somebody rents a hotel room, so he's pater for 30 days. If somebody rents a tzimmer, okay, let's back up a step. We said that a tenant in Eretz Yisrael is chayiv right away. A tenant in Chutz La'aretz is only chayiv after 30 days. A tenant in Eretz Yisrael is chayiv right away. Okay, so I'm renting a tzimmer for 4 days up north. I'm a tenant, I'm chayiv right away. No. A pundik, you're not chayiv right away. A pundik, you're pater for 30 days. And a pundik is defined as a again, there are different definitions given for it. Some say that it's something that's rented by the day rather than by the month, okay, or by the year, right? So something that you rent, you pay per night, right? So that's a pundik. Others say that a pundik is a place where you have no kinyan in the makom. In other words, if you rent an apartment and you want to hang up a picture of the Baba Sali, so obviously you can hang up a picture of the Baba Sali. I'm renting the apartment for a year. I could hang up on the wall whatever I want. If you rent a tzimmer up north and you start hanging up pictures on the wall, right, the guy's going to shoot you. Why? Because it's not yours. You're just renting the hishtamshus of the makom. Whereas when you rent an apartment, you're not renting the hishtamshus of the makom, you're renting the physical things. That's some of the differences between a pundik and a regular schirus. Okay, says the Rama, v'hu adin l'shoyel bayis dinay kesaych. And as let's say your friend lives half the year in Florida, and you're going to be in wherever for a week, and you call him up and you say, Shlomi, you mind if I borrow your house for a week? He says, sure, no problem. Here's the combination. Make yourself comfortable. So that's a shoyel. So a shoyel also is going to be pater for 30 days. Right? And as if the guy that you're borrowing from is not religious and he doesn't have mezuzahs up, so you're pater for 30 days. Chav Gimel. Haseicher bayis migoy chayev b'mezuzah. If you rent a home from a Gentile, you are chayev in mezuzah. Says the Shach, la'achar shleishim yoim b'chutz la'aretz, like before. After 30 days in Chutz La'aretz, Eretz Yisrael miyad. If you rent a home from an Arab, you're chayev right away. So what's the chiddush? Now we just said this in the previous sif. What's the chiddush? That the landlord is a goy rather than a Jew. Kamash malan deloy amrinan kevan shahabaya shel evet kechavim tiftar legamri mezuzah. You might have a havamina to say, when is a tenant chayev in mezuzah? When the owner is Jewish. But what if the owner is a non-Jew? So maybe the dira is pater. So we don't say that. Miu kol heicha deleka mishum sakana bebayis shalevet kechavim dekahagavna pater mezuzah. As long as there's no sakana, and as if the non-Jewish landlord is going to see a mezuzah and he's going to flip out because he's going to say you're doing kishuf or whatever's going on over there, and it's going to come to a sakana, so then you would be pater. But if the landlord is just renting the apartment and he's a regular, normal non-Jew who's not going to get nervous if you put up a mezuzah, so then you're chayev in mezuzah.
What if the owner is Jewish and he has a dira just to rent out as a rental? Is he chayav to put up a mezuzah?
The question being asked is that you have a maskir and a soicher. You have a landlord and a tenant. So let's say the landlord does not have a tenant, right? You own an apartment in Eretz Yisrael, for instance. The guy lives in Teaneck. He owns an apartment in Eretz Yisrael. He rents it out. Now, at the moment, it's been empty for the last 3 months. Is it chayiv and mezuzah or not? That's the question I think that Rabbi Yosef is asking. The answer is that it's potter. Somebody who owns an apartment and does not live there is potter from mezuzah. So for instance, last night, I went to Yerushalayim because I have a cousin who bought an apartment in Yerushalayim. And he called me up a few months ago and he said he needs mezuzahs because he has his apartment in Yerushalayim. So I said, well, you know, you live in Lakewood. Why do you need mezuzahs? Is anybody living there? He said, no, nobody's living there. So this is exactly your question. So I told him it's potter from mezuzahs. So he called me up 2 days ago and he told me that his sister-in-law is moving in today, right? His sister-in-law is moving in today. So now he needs mezuzahs because someone's going to be living there. So I said, okay, you're right. So I went last night and I put up mezuzahs for him. You're going to say they're only moving in today? Reb Chaim Kanievsky talks about that. We'll discuss that some other time. But the point is that as long as nobody's living, so if a guy, there's no chiyuv mezuzah. There's no chiyuv mezuzah. As long as there's nobody living in the apartment, there's no chiyuv mezuzah. Last night I made a bracha.
Even though the apartment was still empty?
Even though the apartment was empty. Because it's within a day or two of somebody coming. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky, that's the Reb Chaim Kanievsky I referenced before, and that's why I made a bracha. Because since his refrigerator is there, and his furniture is there, and his beds are there, so Reb Chaim Kanievsky says that within a day or two of the people arriving to live there, one can make a bracha. There's no chiyuv, very big mistake. People say that once the furniture is there, it's chayiv because it's a beis oitzer. It's like a store. It's like a machsan, right? I'm storing 6 beds there and a refrigerator and a dining room table. So I'm chayiv in mezuzah midin machsan. So that's not correct for 2 reasons. First of all, we saw that there are those that hold that a machsan is only chayiv in mezuzah if it services your home. But over here, the guy lives in Lakewood. The fact that he's storing a dining room table in the middle of Yerushalayim is not servicing his home. You're going to say it is his home? Well, if it's his home, then it's not his storage room, says Reb Elyashiv. In other words, Reb Elyashiv is pointing out that there's a machsan and there's a dira. So you're chayiv to put a mezuzah on a machsan when it's a machsan. But this guy bought an apartment in Yerushalayim. He didn't buy a machsan in Yerushalayim. He bought a beis dira in Yerushalayim, and no one's living in the beis dira. So a beis dira that no one's living in is not a beis dira. It's potter.
Even though it's furnished.
Even though it's furnished, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But a day or two before the person moves in, then already you can put. That's already called tchilas diur, and you can put up a mezuzah. So that's what I did for the guy last night.
The guy owns the furniture.
If a guy owns the furniture,
is that like a shutfus of some sort?
It doesn't make a difference if he owns the furniture. I'm renting the apartment.
If he were living in the apartment with you, it would be...
No, so that's a shaila. That's a shaila. If you have, let's say, I'll tell you where it would be negeh. If you have a frum person in Harvard, right, and he's renting an off-campus apartment, so you have 1 or 2 Jews living in an apartment with 1 or 2 goyim, so that's mamash a shutfus. So that's where you would have the shaila. So that's what the Ramah we saw said, that the shutfus is potter. Right? So there are those that want to say that maybe on the room, let's say the 2 Jewish guys have their own room in the apartment, so maybe that room would be chayiv. That's a discussion. Okay, Reish Pei Zayin. Sif Aleph. Ein hapesach chayiv b'mezuzah ela imkein yesh lo shtei mezuzahs. By the way, I'll just mention that Rabbi Yerucham Fischel Perlau and other poskim hold in the case that I was talking about, where the guy has the apartment in Yerushalayim and he does not live there, he is chayev. So I'll give you an example. You have a person, he's a well-off person. He owns an apartment in America. He owns an apartment in Eretz Yisrael. He owns an apartment in Florida. Right? He goes to all 3, Yom Tif, whatever, summertime, and then he says, you know what? I have an extra $20 million in the bank. I'm going to buy a cabin in Switzerland. Right? And I'm going to go to Switzerland once a year for 2 weeks. So he buys the cabin and he pays somebody to set it up for him, and it's furnished and it's ready, and there's cereal in the pantry. You know, the property manager tells him, whenever you want, get on a flight, it's ready. The linens are on the bed. Says Rabbi Yerucham Fischel Perlau and others that he is chayev. not like what I told you before, because they say that a dira, base dira, is a residence. So once it's ready to be inhabited, now the linens are on the bed, there's cereal in the pantry, so that's your residence. Now, dira doesn't mean I actually have to have slept there. Dira means that it's a residence of mine. So once it's ready, now as long as they're still doing construction, it's pater. That's l'kulei alma. But once it's ready, and the beds are in, and the cabinets are in, and the refrigerator's in, so then that's a residence. A residence is chayav. That's what they hold, but we don't paskin that way. Siman reish pei zayin. Eza pesach chayav b'mezuzah. Halacha aleph. Ein ha-pesach chayav b'mezuzah, ela im kein yesh lo shtei mezuzahs umashkeif. You have to have 2 posts and a lintel. So there's a shach and a taz over here. Let's see the taz. He speaks it out a little more by Riches. Betur, kosev him, ein ha-mashkeif she'adel zakaf olav lamala yashar. So this is just a side halacha. Ela even nichnas ve'even yotzei. Oy she'eina mezuzah yeshara. Ela even nichnas ve'even yotzei poter. Now, this is similar. We mentioned this a few days ago. There's something called a pesach and there's something called a pirza. Right? So like in the cartoons, when the guy goes through the wall, right? So you have, technically it's a doorway, right? I could walk through that now, right? It's life size. But it's still going to be poter. Why? Because it's a pirza. What defines it as a pirza rather than a pesach? This taz. The fact that it's uneven, it's jagged. A regular doorway has smooth posts and a smooth lintel, and it's a normal entryway. But if you have a jagged thing, you hired Arabs to make you a halal, and they come with a sledgehammer and they bust a hole in the wall, right, which they're walking through. That's how they're doing the construction for you. So charj b'chayev, it's a pesach to the halal. Teretz says no, because it's not smooth posts, it's jagged. That's this taz. Taz continues, pesach she'ein lo ela mezuzah achas. What if a pesach only has 1 post? Rashi, Hatur, right? This is the Tur b'shem the Rosh that he's quoting now. Kagain shemitzad echad over hakoisel lahola mipesach kazeh, imam mezuzah mitzad yamin kazeh chayev, and mitzad small poter. So what he's saying is, there's pictures in Moshe Shulchan Aruch, but I made my own pictures over here. Let's say you have a person is walking into the apartments. Over here, on the right side, you have a wall that's flush, straight across. You know, there's no post on the right side. Where's the post? The post is on the left side. So such an instance is going to be poter. However, according to the Rush, what about this case? We have a post on the right side as you're entering, and it's the left side that's flush. So then you would be poter. So this is very, very, very common in hallways, especially here in apartments in Eretz Yisrael. Extremely common. You're in the living room, the salon as it's known, and you're walking into the hallway. It's very common that you will have one of these 2 scenarios, that you'll have a post on one side, but the other wall is flush. So that's what this Taz is quoting, the Tur, who's quoting the Rush, that would be chayv. So this is a machlekes hapeiskim. Right? The Mechaber says clearly you need 2 posts and a lintel. So according to the Sfaradim, there's nothing to talk about. But according to others, right, the Rush specifically, if you have 1 post, if that post is on the right side, you're going to be chayev. Now, Rav Vosner points out that that's only if there's something on the left side, right? Like the picture we just saw. So there's a post on the right and there's a wall on the left. But sometimes the person's apartment is situated such that there's a post on the right as I go in the hallway, but on the left side there's nothing. Now, the kitchen is on the right side, and the salon is on the left side, and the bedroom is pushing into the salon, so the hallway starts on the right side with a post in the salon, but the left side is still the kitchen. It's open. There's no wall over there. So Rav Vosner says that's not chayav according to anybody.
Where a wall ends, that's considered a post?
So a wall, very good. So the question being asked is what's called in halachic parlance a seif kaisel. A seif kaisel or a seif tikra, is that a chiyuv, which means where exactly the way you described it, where a wall ends. You know, do you need an actual post? Or if the wall just ends, and again, this is most common by hallways. When you're entering the hallway from your salon, living room, dining room, into the hallway to the bedrooms, it's very, very common that there's no posts at all, but there is a ches over there. There's a doorway that you're entering into a tunnel, right? So this is a shaila. It's a big discussion. It's too long to go into now. It's a big shaila. Every case needs to be asked because there are very delicate nuances that can change the shaila mamish from the 1 foot or even 1 inch to the next. So it's a discussion. Beis. Bayesh yesh le mezuzah mikan umikan v'kipa k'min keshes al shtei ha-mezuzahs b'mokem ha-mashkeif im yesh b'goyve ha-mezuzah 10 tvachim ha-yoser chayev v'im ein bei 10 tvachim poter mipnei she'ein le mashkeif. So this is also one of the most lengthy and complicated halachic sections of Hilchas Mezuzah, which is also very negate to Hilchas Eruvin, and you can give a week's worth of shiurim on this, but the Mechaber says it in 2 lines, and that is if you have what's known in English as an arch, an archway. So an archway, the Mechaber says over here that in order to be chayev, you have to have mezuzah mikan umikan, a post on the right and the left, v'kipa kimin keshes al shtei ha-mezuzahs, and on top of the 2 posts you have an arch, b'mokem ha-mashkef, in lieu of a lintel. So that's what the Mechaber is saying. Im yesh b'goyve ha-mezuzahs 10 tvachim, if the 2 posts are 10 tvachim high, or yoser, chayev. So then this doorway needs a mezuzah. Because why? Because the archway is in place of a lintel. Now, as we consider the arch as a lintel, but again, he's making a proviso that you have 2 posts that are at least 10 tefachim high. What's he coming la'afuke? He's coming la'afuke, an archway that starts from the floor, right? Which somebody actually sent me a picture yesterday of a brand new apartment in Florida, and he wanted to know, showed me a picture, I could show it to you, of an apartment that actually has in the living room, dining room area, an archway that starts from the floor. I never saw such a thing before in normal living quarters, but that's the way they have it.
You have Angel City. You have Angel City. You have entrance.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So according to the Mechaber, this would be potter. According to Rashi, it's chayev, and many achronim say that one should be machmer to be chayshish for Rashi, but the Mechaber paskins that it's potter. V'im ein loy 10 tefachim potter. If you don't, if you don't have posts of 10 tefachim high, then it's potter. Nesha ein loy mashkeif. Because what the Mechaber is saying is that if it starts from the ground, so then you don't have a lintel. If I have posts that are 10 tefachim high, then I consider the arch as a lintel. But if it starts from the ground, where's your lintel? That's the Mechaber's taina, and therefore the Mechaber says it's potter. Now there's a separate machlokes, which we don't have time to go into, about where do you put the mezuzah. Now, let's say the Mechaber's case, you have posts that are 10 tefachim high, and then you have an arch that goes on top of that. So the doorway, so 10 tefachim high is only waist high. The doorway itself is 7 feet high, right? Let's say it's a wide doorway, and you have an archway. So where do you put the mezuzah? You put the mezuzah by your waist, you put the mezuzah tefach below your waist, put the mezuzah on the arch, but the Mechaber seems to be saying that the arch is the lintel. If the arch is the lintel, you can't put your mezuzah on your lintel. So this is a very, very big machlokes. There's a sefer called Inside Stam that has diagrams and gives some basic guidelines. But if you look in any sefer on Hilchas Mezuzah, you'll see that they tell you where to put the mezuzah.
Straight, but they're on an angle like that.
If the posts themselves are like that,
yeah.
The pashtus is that would be the same machlokes. That's like a tzrif. Also come in tzrif, so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, has the same din as a archway.
Put all these Eruv metal boards that they put up, that should be perfectly perpendicular.
The boards are there for a different thing. The boards are there so that the string of the Eruv is directly above the post. They're nervous that the string might move, so they make a wider base at the bottom to ensure that the string is above the post. If you look in the Taz, he says an astonishing astonishing. Actually, we're not up to it yet. Let's first see the Ramah, then we'll see what I think is an astonishing Taz. Hagah, v'kol shekein Pesach she'ein by goyba asara tvachim depater mimezuzah. So this actually is more negeh than you think. It's negeh. Very often people make what's called a crawl space. Why is it called a crawl? Why is it called a crawl space? Because you have to crawl to be inside of it. So where is that? That's usually either a storage area that's created under a staircase, or an attic, right? Somebody has in their attic. So in such instances, there is a door, but that door is not 10 tvachim high, says the Ramah, so it's pater mimezuzah. And then here the Ramah quotes the famous Maril, where the Maril says, Haminig nispashit b'medinas elu. There is a minig that has spread. The Roiv Oilam, most of the Welt, Seimchin al Mezuzah Achas, they are Seimich on a single Mezuzah, Sha'oisin al Pesach Batehem, that they make at the entrance of their home, meaning they don't have any other Mezuzahs. Ve'enai Nochain, this minig is wrong. Ve'ein lahem al Masha Yismechu, there's no limud zchus. Lachain, Kol Yoreh Shamayim Yitakin Beisei Kedinai, and therefore a person who's Yoreh Shamayim should put up mezuzahs. Now, if I was reading this or writing this, I would say, why should Yoreh Shamayim put up a mezuzah? Because he's chayiv in mezuzah, right? It says it has something, I don't know, it's very, I don't know, pick your own adjective. Says the Taz in Sifkat and Dalid, Ve'ein lahem al nashi yismechu, they have nothing to rely on. Shekol mi shenoga yiras elikim b'libay. Anyone who has an iota of Yoreh Shamayim, v'roitza leishev betach mimoire ruchais rois, and he wants to have security in his home, chas v'shalom, mimoire ruchais rois chas v'shalom, yasem mezuzah l'chol psachav. So the Taz seems to be saying the exact opposite of the famous Rambam. There's a very famous Rambam where the Rambam more or less says that anybody who puts up a mezuzah for protection is a rasha and an apikairis, and he's going straight to Gehenna, and ein lechelik leilam haba, and whatever. Very not nice things that the Rambam has to say about such a person. So what's the Rambam's point? Why should you put up a mezuzah? Because Hashem said put up a mezuzah. It's one of the 613 mitzvahs, period. There happens to be a side benefit that you get protection, which is very nice. I'll take it. But that's not why you put up a mezuzah. Now, again, so if I was reading this Ramah and I was saying, Ve'ein lahem al masha yismechu, l'chein Yoreh Shamayim should put up a mezuzah because you're chayiv. Says the Taz, no, you know why you should put up a mezuzah? Because if you have any Yoreh Shamayim and you want to be safe, put up a mezuzah. I don't know, it's a very funny thing to say. Yeah, but it would seem from the Rambam that if that's going to be your pitch, better not to be makar of them. That's the Rambam was a hardliner.